Have you ever wondered why a man, once full of charm, warmth, and fire, suddenly turns into a shadow of himself when the woman he loves walks away? Not the shallow kind of heartbreak, the kind that bruises the ego for a few weeks, but the deep, soul-level rupture that shakes him awake from the illusion of who he thought he was. When a woman breaks a man's soul, something ancient inside him is forced to rise, like a serpent disturbed from sleep. It's not merely sadness or loss. It's the confrontation with his own shadow, the hidden and denied aspects of his psyche that he has projected onto her since the beginning. In the beginning, he doesn't love the woman as she truly is. He loves the reflection of his own ideal, the image of perfection he's been yearning for since childhood. She becomes the mirror of his anima, the inner feminine that Jung said lives within every man. Her voice, her warmth, her approval, they awaken in him the memory of the mother archetype, the primal source of comfort and chaos. When she looks at him with adoration, he feels whole again, as though he has finally been chosen by the goddess who could redeem all his forgotten wounds. But when she withdraws, when she stops reflecting his worth, his inner world collapses. The goddess becomes a ghost, and he is left to face the emptiness he spent years escaping. That is when the breaking begins, not by her cruelty but by her absence. Because no one truly breaks another. They simply remove the illusion that kept the other from seeing the cracks already there. Her silence becomes a mirror too, showing him every unhealed fracture in his being. He can't breathe, not because she left, but because without her gaze he no longer knows who he is. This is the Jungian tragedy, the collapse of the persona, the false self he performed to deserve love. The man who once stood proud in his armor now trembles before the void. The woman who once nurtured him into confidence now forces him into rebirth. You might not realize it, but this is when the real initiation begins. Most men never recover from such a break. They drown in bitterness, blaming the feminine for their pain. They speak of betrayal, manipulation, or cruelty, not realizing they are still speaking to their own reflection. But a few, very few, take this pain as an invitation to descend into themselves. They enter the underworld of their psyche, the place Jung called the shadow realm. There they meet the ghosts of their own making. The boy who was never enough, the son who was never truly seen, the lover who always feared abandonment. It is here, amidst the ashes of lost love, that a man can finally begin to see his soul. For the woman, this breaking is not always intentional. Often, she doesn't even realize the power she holds. Her withdrawal, her rising into her own selfhood, her refusal to mother his wounds, these are acts of unconscious alchemy. When she reclaims herself, she dismantles the illusion he has built around her. And in doing so, she becomes both destroyer and liberator. The man will call her cold, distant, heartless. But beneath the surface, he knows she is forcing him toward truth. She is tearing the veil between his ego and his essence. And no man can emerge from such a reckoning unchanged. You see, when a woman breaks his soul, she's not destroying him. She's calling him to confront his own divinity, to strip away the layers of pride, projection, and performance that have kept him small. The pain he feels is sacred. It is the death cry of the false self. Every sleepless night, every unanswered message, every replay of her laughter in his mind, it's not punishment. It's purification. The universe, through her, is reminding him that love cannot be possessed, that the feminine is not a prize to be won, but a mystery to be honored. Only when he surrenders to that truth can he begin to love again, not as a beggar seeking validation, but as a soul meeting another soul. And yet, the irony is profound. The woman who breaks his soul often loves him the most, but she loves him in truth, not in illusion. She refuses to carry the weight of his unhealed inner child. She stops soothing his insecurities and begins mirroring his potential instead. She withdraws not to punish but to awaken, because she knows, consciously or not, that a man who has not faced his own darkness cannot truly meet her light. And so she becomes the fire that burns him clean. For you, watching or listening now, perhaps you have been that woman. Perhaps you've watched a man unravel in your absence, blaming you for the pain that was never yours to carry. You felt guilt for walking away, for choosing your peace over his comfort. But what if you understood that your leaving was the medicine his soul required? That, in breaking him, you were setting him free? Because no man finds himself in pleasure. He finds himself in loss, in the silence after the storm, in the ruins of what he thought was love, but was merely projection. When the illusion dies, a man stands before his own ruins. The echoes of her voice still haunt his nights. The scent of her presence lingers in the hollow of his memory. He searches for her in other faces, in fleeting warmths, in the half-hearted affection of strangers who can never replicate what she represented. Yet it isn't her he is searching for. It is himself, the self that once came alive in her gaze, the self he had buried beneath ambition, bravado, and fear. When she broke his soul, she didn't merely leave. She dismantled the false temple he had built to worship his own ego. Carl Jung wrote that, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the moment when fate becomes visible. The man who feels destroyed by love is actually standing on the threshold of his own awakening. But most resist it. They run from the mirror she has left behind. They distract themselves with noise, validation, control, anything to escape the silence that now confronts them. Yet that silence is sacred. It is the dark night of the soul, the space where transformation quietly begins. For some, this descent feels endless. The masculine psyche, raised to conquer and suppress, knows little of surrender. Pain feels like failure. Tears feel like weakness, and vulnerability feels like exposure. So he hides. He builds new walls, stronger ones this time, and swears never to let anyone close enough to wound him again. But the walls also block the light. He doesn't realize that by protecting himself from pain, he is also shielding himself from growth. The wound festers in the dark, whispering the truth he refuses to hear, that love was never meant to save him from himself. It was meant to introduce him to himself. Meanwhile, the woman continues her journey, perhaps with her own ache and confusion. She may question whether she was too harsh, too distant, too much. But the deeper truth is that her instinct guided her toward liberation. By refusing to remain small to preserve his comfort, she broke both of their illusions. Her detachment was an act of sacred rebellion. It called him to grow. It called her to rise. And though she may never see the ripple her departure set in motion, it is there, in his sleepless self-reflection, in the quiet moments when he begins to see the patterns for what they are. When a man begins to awaken from this pain, something shifts. He realizes that she was never his property, never his emotional caretaker, never his redemption. She was the mirror of his divine feminine, the living symbol of his own capacity for empathy, intuition, and depth. The part of himself he had long suppressed out of fear that softness equated to weakness. In truth, her love had always been an invitation to integrate, to unite the inner warrior with the inner poet, the mind with the heart, the masculine with the feminine. And when she left, that invitation became a demand. He may resent her for this. Many men do, because awakening hurts more than heartbreak ever could. It requires the death of self-importance. It asks him to stand naked before his own contradictions. The protector who wounds, the lover who fears love, the leader who cannot yet lead himself. But when he stops fighting, when he allows the grief to wash through him, he finds something unexpected beneath the pain. Clarity, a sense of stillness that was never dependent on her. This is where individuation begins, the Jungian process of becoming whole. He no longer seeks to be completed by another. He seeks to know himself. And what of the woman who broke his soul? She carries her own transformation too, for in breaking him, she also confronted her shadow, the parts of her that wanted to save, to heal, to be the exception. She learns that love is not meant to be martyrdom, that she is not responsible for carrying another's unconscious pain. She learns to choose peace over potential, to honor her intuition even when it leads her away from the arms of someone she once believed was her destiny. In the language of the soul, this is evolution. It is the rising of the divine feminine not in tenderness alone, but in strength and discernment, and yet the connection between them never truly dies. Energy never disappears, it transforms. His growth carries traces of her courage. Her empowerment carries echoes of his longing. They move forward as new beings, each a catalyst for the other's awakening. The soul doesn't mourn endings, it honors transformation. Because in truth, she didn't break his soul, she broke the shell around it. And from that fracture, something sacred emerged, a man capable of depth, humility, and real love. If you've ever been that woman, know this: you were not cruel for walking away. You were divine for holding up the mirror of truth, because only through the breaking can a man be reborn. In the aftermath of that rupture, time itself begins to feel distorted. The man moves through his days half-present, haunted by what he cannot name. It's not just the loss of her that unsettles him. It's the unraveling of the story he built around her. Every memory feels charged, symbolic, alive with the weight of meaning. The way she looked at him when he spoke his dreams, the silence between their arguments, the last moment they touched. Each fragment becomes a cipher for the truth he avoided, that love was never meant to be ownership. It was meant to be revelation. In the Jungian sense, she has awakened his anima, the archetypal feminine within him. Once dormant, now restless, she stirs beneath his ribs like a spirit long denied. This awakening brings both beauty and torment. Beauty, because it softens him. It makes him see colors again, listen to music differently, sense the fragility in others. But torment, because it dismantles his illusions of control. He begins to feel life more acutely, the ache of absence, the sting of regret, the yearning for authenticity. He realizes that all his relationships before her were rehearsals, dances performed to avoid true vulnerability. She was the first to reach past the mask and touch the man behind the armor. But that touch came with a price. To feel deeply is to suffer deeply. It is to face the ghosts that have lingered for decades, unacknowledged yet ever present. He remembers the emotional distance of his father, the overbearing love of his mother, the childhood moments when he learned that being strong meant being silent. And suddenly, the heartbreak is no longer about her. It's about everything he has never allowed himself to feel. The floodgates open. The inner boy, once silenced, begins to cry. The shadow he has spent a lifetime suppressing now demands attention. Jung called this the confrontation with the unconscious, and it is never gentle. It is a descent into the labyrinth of one's psyche, where every turn reveals another part of the self that must be faced and integrated. Meanwhile, the woman, often unaware of the magnitude of what she has set in motion, feels a strange duality. Part of her grieves, aching for the connection that once felt divine. But another part, the wiser and quieter one, feels an almost sacred relief. She has chosen herself over illusion. And though that choice burns, it also liberates. Because to love from wholeness, she must first stop loving from lack. She must stop trying to heal men who refuse to meet their own shadow. In her stillness, she too transforms. Her compassion becomes sharper, her boundaries stronger. She no longer confuses suffering with depth, nor chaos with passion. She begins to sense the difference between chemistry that wounds and connection that elevates. For both, the alchemy continues in silence. He wrestles with his demons. She learns to trust her solitude. He discovers that her leaving was not rejection, it was initiation. And she discovers that breaking him was never cruelty, it was truth. This is the divine paradox of relationships that operate on a soul level. They are not meant to last forever in form. They are meant to ignite transformation, to strip both souls bare until they remember who they were before fear took over. You see, every man carries within him a kingdom built from his experiences. When a woman like her enters, she becomes the storm that tests the strength of those walls. If they crumble, it is not because she was destructive, but because they were never meant to endure. And once the storm passes, what remains is not ruin, but foundation. Real, solid, untouched by illusion. From there, he can build again, not from fear of abandonment, but from the quiet power of self-understanding. And she She becomes the mirror of divine chaos, the archetype of transformation itself. Like Lilith, she walks away from subservience. Like Persephone, she returns from the underworld crowned in wisdom. She learns that her worth was never tied to being understood, loved, or chosen by him. It was always in her ability to see beyond his defenses and still love the truth beneath. And when the time came to choose between her light and his darkness, she chose her own. Perhaps this is the most misunderstood form of love, the kind that awakens through breaking. It defies romance and defiles comfort. It forces both souls to face what they've denied. For him, it's the death of ego. For her, it's the rebirth of power. And though they may never meet again in the same form, they will always carry pieces of each other. She, the memory of the man she helped awaken. He, the ghost of the woman who forced him to see. And in that haunting lies grace. Because no soul ever breaks without reason. The breaking itself is the call of the self, the deepest part of us yearning to evolve. Jung called this the process of individuation, the sacred path toward wholeness. What looks like heartbreak on the surface is, in truth, the soul's rebellion against stagnation. Through pain, both are purified. Through loss, both remember what cannot be lost. There comes a moment after the storm when everything grows quiet. The rage softens, the tears dry, and the man sits in stillness for the first time in his life. No distractions, no pursuit, just silence, and within it something begins to stir. It is not the desire to win her back, nor the impulse to replace her. It is a whisper, faint but undeniable, rising from the core of his being. Know yourself. This is where his real journey begins. The soul broken by love becomes fertile ground for awakening. What once felt like punishment now feels like a strange kind of grace. For the first time he begins to observe himself, the way he speaks, reacts, retreats. He notices how much of his life has been an unconscious performance, a ritual of self-preservation disguised as strength. The armor he wore so proudly was never forged from courage. It was woven from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy, fear of being truly seen. The woman's departure tore that armor away, and though he stands exposed and trembling, he is closer to authenticity than ever before. Carl Jung taught that every soul carries both the masculine and feminine within it, and true wholeness can only arise when these forces are reconciled. For the man, this means confronting the feminine within himself, the anima he once sought entirely in women. He begins to understand that what he loved in her was not something she gave him, but something she reflected. Her intuition, her softness, her emotional depth, these were mirrors of the qualities he had suppressed in himself. To integrate them now is to reclaim the parts of his soul he once exiled. The act of love becomes an act of self-acceptance. But integration is not easy. It demands that he faces his shadow, the repository of everything he has denied, the jealousy, the possessiveness, the need for control, the deep-seated resentment toward vulnerability. All of it surfaces like ancient ghosts demanding acknowledgement. And yet, in this darkness, he begins to find fragments of light. Every confrontation brings understanding. Every tear becomes a baptism. Slowly, the pain that once defined him becomes the forge in which his consciousness expands. And as he transforms, something remarkable happens. The resentment he once held toward her dissolves. The anger, the sense of betrayal, the narrative of victimhood, they begin to lose power. In their place arises gratitude, because he sees now that she was never his enemy. She was the divine disruptor, the necessary catalyst. Her love, her absence, her silence, all of it was the language of the universe calling him back to himself. She was never there to complete him. She was there to awaken him. And in that realization, his soul begins to heal. Meanwhile, the woman continues walking her own path, though her transformation mirrors his in a different key. She has learned to no longer carry the emotional labor of men's awakening. She has learned that compassion without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. There is a quiet power in her now, a grace that does not explain, a softness that does not bend to be understood. The more she honors her own voice, the more radiant she becomes. And from afar, if he glimpses her again, he will feel it, not as longing, but as reverence, because she embodies what once terrified him, the union of tenderness and sovereignty. The dance between them, though now invisible, continues in the unseen realms. Each step he takes toward self-awareness echoes with the lessons she once embodied. Each boundary she upholds honors the strength he helped reveal within her. What began as heartbreak has become initiation. This is the hidden purpose of deep connection, to awaken the God within the human, the eternal within the temporary. They were never meant to stay trapped in the roles of lover and beloved. They were meant to become whole. And if, by some twist of fate, their paths cross again, they will not recognize each other as the same beings. For the boy who once needed her validation has become a man who validates himself. And the woman who once mothered his wounds has become the woman who guards her peace like sacred ground. Between them there will be no bitterness, no pleading, only a silent acknowledgement. We met to awaken each other. You might wonder, why must love hurt to heal? Why must the soul break to awaken? Because pain is the great revealer. It tears away illusion faster than comfort ever could. Without discomfort, the ego would reign unchallenged, mistaking survival for meaning. Only when life brings you to your knees do you see what was always beneath the surface. The heart breaks not to destroy but to expand. Every ending is an initiation into greater awareness. Every loss is a mirror reflecting what you are meant to reclaim within yourself. And so, the woman who broke his soul did not end him. She resurrected him. Her absence taught him what her presence could not, that wholeness is born in solitude, that love without attachment is freedom, that strength without tenderness is hollowness. He rises now not to chase but to create, not to possess but to honor. The man who emerges from this kind of pain does not look outward for validation anymore. He has met the divine within his own depths, and that meeting changes everything. There comes a day when he wakes up and realizes the ache is gone. The heaviness in his chest has lifted, replaced by a stillness that feels unfamiliar, almost divine. He no longer searches her name in the memories of his mind, no longer rewrites the story to soothe his pride. What once felt like tragedy now feels like initiation. The wound, which once throbbed with unbearable longing, has turned into wisdom. It no longer bleeds, it breathes. This is the final transformation, the point where the man no longer seeks to fix, to prove, to win. The shadow he once fought now sits beside him as an ally. The feminine within him, the anima he once externalized, has become his inner guide, teaching him intuition, patience, and grace. He is no longer a man split between what he shows and what he hides. He is whole. The love that once consumed him has transmuted into something higher. Compassion. Compassion for her, for himself, for the wounded humanity within them both. He understands now that no one breaks another without being broken too, and no one awakens another without also awakening themselves. When Carl Jung wrote about individuation, he described it as a sacred marriage between opposites, the conscious and unconscious, the masculine and feminine, the shadow and the light. This is what has quietly occurred within him. The woman he once saw as his salvation was merely the mirror of this inner union. By losing her, he found what she represented, and what she represented was not possession, it was presence. Not control, but connection. Not desire, but devotion. Now, when he meets women, he no longer projects fantasies upon them. He sees them as they are, complex, sovereign, luminous in their own right. He no longer demands that they soothe his insecurity or bear the weight of his forgotten pain. He meets them not as a boy searching for his mother, but as a man capable of meeting the goddess without trembling. He has learned that love is not about merging into one another. It is about standing whole beside another whole, and she, the woman who broke him, feels his transformation. Across the invisible threads that once bound them. She may not see it, but on some intuitive level, she senses it. the peace that has replaced his chaos, the acceptance that has replaced his grasping. There is no bitterness left between them, only an echo of something sacred that once was and still is in a different form. She feels gratitude, too, for her own evolution, for the courage it took to walk away, for the clarity that now illuminates her path. Because she, too, has changed. The woman who once felt the weight of his emotional gravity has become untethered. She no longer confuses nurturing with rescuing. She no longer accepts half-love or the promise of potential. The part of her that once needed to be chosen has dissolved. She now chooses herself. Her love has matured from urgency to serenity. She does not chase, she attracts. She does not beg, she invites. And should they ever cross paths again, she would look at him not with nostalgia, but with respect. For both know that what once shattered them has now made them sacred. In the end, this is the story of all souls who dare to love deeply. The breaking is not the end. It is the beginning. Every relationship that sears the heart is a vessel of evolution. Through one another, we are forced to confront the parts of ourselves that cannot yet love freely. The possessiveness, the fear, the shame, these are not flaws to hide, but invitations to heal. The woman who breaks his soul is not cruel. She is divine disruption. The man who rises from that breaking is not ruined. He is reborn, and somewhere beyond the noise of memory, their souls bow to each other, not in longing, but in recognition. Because both now understand what the ego could not, that love was never meant to make us comfortable. It was meant to make us conscious. The truest love does not complete, it awakens. And when awakening is done, when both have reclaimed what they projected, love becomes something quieter, simpler, and infinitely stronger. It becomes the silent knowing that you are already whole. She walks through her days now with calm certainty. Her eyes no longer seek proof of worth in another's devotion. She moves like a woman who has danced with fire and emerged untouched. She knows that love will come again, not to fill her, but to meet her. And when it does, she will not cling. She will flow, because she has learned the final truth, that love rooted in freedom is the only love that endures. He, too, has found peace. He no longer fears the silence, no longer runs from himself. His soul, once broken, has become the vessel through which wisdom flows. He loves again, but differently, without hunger, without fear. His strength is now anchored in stillness, his power tempered by humility. He knows that the woman who broke him did not destroy his capacity to love. She expanded it. Through her, he learned that the purpose of pain is not suffering, but transformation. And so the story ends not with reunion, but with rebirth. Two souls who met not to possess, but to awaken. Two beings who touched, not to stay, but to remind each other of who they were before the world taught them to forget. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.